Hello, everyone. Welcome to Capitals 101. My name is Quinn Munba. I am Braves Capital FC. I am one of the few people in the Alliance who has the skill set to properly command capital ships. Today, we're going to go through just some of the basics about the mechanics of flying capitals, how to choose what would be right for the situation, what the strengths and weaknesses of each platform are, and some basics of what to make sure you have ready to go before you undock. So, first thing I want to bring up, the main difference between a capital and a subcapital ship, with the exception of it being huge, obviously, is that capital ships in their entirety have what's called a jump drive. So that is going to allow you to bypass system gates and go straight from one system to another immediately. There are some prerequisites to using this, and there are also costs to doing so. However, it does allow you to instantaneously get from point A to point B. So each size of ship is going to have a different maximum range. In this case, I am currently sitting in a Titan that is technically a super capital ship, but it also provides us a good example. I can go into attributes, and if you notice, it has a maximum jump range of 6 light years. That is not actually what the base value is. If I go and pull up an avatar while not in the ship, apparently I've forgotten how to click and drag with the new UI. There we go, share a link. If it will cooperate and drop. So if I open it up outside of that, it should... Nope, it is still applying everything. Lovely. There are several skills that you need to train in order to utilize a capital effectively. And a lot of them have to do with your jump drive skills. So under navigation is going to be where they're all located. There are 4 of them for a standard capital. Jump drive calibration and operation, and then jump fuel conservation. For Brave's capital group, we require jump drive operation and calibration to 5. Operation is actually a prerequisite for most of the other skills that will be used. But jump drive calibration is the one that gives you additional range, right? So if you don't have jump drive calibration 5, you will not be able to hit the 6 light years with a super capital, 7 light years with a capital. That is the maximum range, and we do expect that out of all of our pilots. Virtually every group in EVE that has a full-fledged capital fleet is going to expect that. The other skill that is rather important is jump fuel conservation. I mentioned that using a jump drive has a couple of costs. One of them is fuel. You have to consume fuel in order to use the jump drive. This skill will determine how much fuel you have to use for each jump based on a combination of factors. The range, what ship it is. I actually believe that's it, unless you're talking jump freighters or rorquals. They have special modules that you can put in, and they also have secondary skills that decrease the fuel burn. And with this skill in particular, the requirement to join Brave's cap group is to have it to 4. That is because some holes are actually rather limited in terms of what they can do. How far they can go without having it at least to 4. Specifically, faxes, which we'll get into later. So that's the basics of, what the skills do. Next thing we need to do is go over how to use it, right? That is the single most important thing to be able to join a capital fleet. You need to be able to undock, and you need to be able to jump to the Cyno. So, thing to note, I believe this is not showing in the Discord stream. No, it is showing in the Discord stream. I'm sorry, I switched it over to doing a screen capture instead of a game capture. So you are currently looking at my alt in a Rapier, which is a Cyno ship. It's the smallest one that can actually light a Cyno nowadays. I'm not going to go into too much detail on the Cyno ships or anything, but I do want to highlight one thing, which is that you have to be in a fleet to light the Cyno. As you see, cannot set Cynosaurus field. Someone is echoing. Derpius, you are echoing on Discord. If you could please mute. Oh, you didn't need to drop Discord. You just needed to click the mute button for Discord. So that way it wasn't.
Okay, this is the quickest way to mute. I'll figure it out.
Okay. Anyways, so once you are in a fleet, you can then light your Cyno. And to use it, what you're going to do is obviously you have to undock, as I'm doing right now. It takes a minute, sometimes. There are 2 ways to do it. One is to add the Cyno to your watch list beforehand. You will typically get C's in fleet. You can just right-click the name, and I'm going to try and make it so that way this shows up in the recording. There we go. Fleet. And I already have them on watch list, so it's not here, but it would normally show up right in here. You can also just directly jump to them from this context menu, but that requires that it still be visible once you've undocked. So adding them to watch list ahead of time is typically going to be best, and then you will want to right-click their name in the watch list and use that button. Otherwise, you also have the option to use your capacitor menu. When you're in a capital, if you notice, there are 2 options right here that are not normally there in subcaps. There are also 2 more down here that aren't visible unless you are in a Titan or a Blops or Rorqual carrier for the Bridge 2. Although with carriers it says conduit jump. So I am going to go ahead and jump to my Cyno. There we go. Animation triggers. We're going to land. First thing to keep in mind. Landing after jumping to a Cyno gives you 1 minute of location change timer invulnerability. Just the same as taking a gate. The instant you do anything, you become vulnerable. You are also blocked from tethering for a minute. That is why you are typically told to dock immediately on land, which I'm going to go ahead and do now. There we go. The next thing to keep in mind when you are using a jump drive, CCP, many moons ago, decided that they were tired of PL yeeting their entire super fleet across the entire game in under 5 minutes to drop on somebody's fun engagement, ruin it, and then get back home before anyone can do anything about it. And so they incorporated what's known as jump fatigue to the game. Thankfully, they fixed the problems with it, so that way you can't wind up with a 6-month red timer anymore, because that was a thing at one point. So what this does, every time you jump, you gain what's referred to as blue timer. That's the phrase that we tend to use. And that is shown by this icon right here on my screen. If you hover over it, it gives you a timer and a countdown. So the other timer is your red timer. In terms of your ability to jump again, it is only the red timer that matters. What the blue timer determines is how long the red timer will be after your next jump. So if you notice, it's just under 4 minutes right now. I've been talking for about a minute, 2 minutes since I jumped. Your initial jump is typically going to be between 4.5 to 6 minutes, depending on what ship it is, how far you're jumping, etc., etc. The few ships that get a fatigue reduction, which, almost none of them are pertinent to this class, that being Black Ops battleships, jump freighters, and Rorquals. Those will obviously wind up with a lower reactivation timer and a lower fatigue timer. That being the red and blue timers respectively, since I hadn't used those terms. But in general, you will, as you continue to jump, your red timer will typically be 5 to 6 minutes, then another 5 to 6 minutes, and then you're at 30. There are some exceptions where it will be higher. Like, for example, with supers, I believe that the second jump can sometimes wind up significantly higher, like around 12 minutes I've seen. But I think that was with just the tiniest little bit of blue timer before I started moving. The other thing to keep in mind, if you are trying to keep your red timer to a minimum, as soon as your blue timer, your jump fatigue timer, hits 10 minutes, it's effectively 0. It stops being a factor in your next jump. Any questions so far?
Yeah, I have a couple questions.
Sure, go for it.
So, you mentioned, actually, I hear myself double. Is that from the stream?
That would be from the stream, yes. Just
okay, yeah.
Here, let me.
I muted it. I got it now. Thank you. Sorry.
I just disabled sharing stream audio, so it shouldn't be a factor now.
Perfect. You briefly covered, Cynos. So one thing I was trying to figure out, is it possible for people not in your fleet to jump to your Cyno without them being in your fleet?
Not with a Cyno that you are lighting. The only way that you can jump to something that is not in your fleet is I believe it's the Faraloot Cyno beacon. I can't remember the name perfectly.
Yeah, you got it right.
But that one is controlled by ACLs, so it's handled as if you were docking somewhere. If it is a person lighting a Cyno for you, you have to be in the same fleet, period, end of discussion. If the Cyno is lit before you join the fleet and is still up, you can still jump to it. If the Cyno pilot lights the Cyno and then joins your fleet because they dropped out of their previous one, you can't. You have to wait for it to go down, and then they have to put it back up. So you want to make sure that you are in the correct fleet when you're lighting a Cyno.
Cyno belongs to the fleet, basically.
Another question is about actually positioning the Cyno near in tether range, but not too close enough. Any I know you don't want to be too close to the Fortizar So is there like any? I don't know if you're going to go over that part or not. I don't want to jump ahead, but I wondered how you guys did it because I was learning how to do it.
Obviously, I know how to do it. It basically has to do with using your tactical overlay, which you can see I'm running, to determine the range from the model. And what you do is you just kind of, you know what's supposed to be jumping to your Cyno, you position it according to that. But in general, my suggestion, never jump to a structure that you can't dock in. That's the easiest possible solution. If you are, for example, a Titan pilot and you are asked to jump to a Fortizar in order to bridge, the FCs will typically be lighting the Cyno for you. We know the spacing. We should be able to handle it, right? It's not something you should have to worry about. If anyone really wants to know that, I can teach that later, but I don't want to cover it as part of the class just because it's excess time. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I was moving a Capital, and I was trying to make my own light my own Cynos, and I had to I didn't know where the tacticals were, and I just didn't know if that something was going to be covered in this type of class, like actually positioning your your Cyno so that you're not too close to the Fortizar, so that when you do take the Cyno to with your ship, that you don't bounce off the structure and then end up in not being able to immediately dock.
Yeah, so the easiest solution to that, if you are in a standard Capital, only jump to Fortizars, Sodius, Keepstars. You will be able to dock. Specifically blue ones. Make sure that they're blue ones. Don't jump to low sec free ports. That's bad juju. 90% of the time they're traps.
I was mostly just talking about the actual distance away from the structure, so you don't bounce off of it. Like that was
You could mouse over the Cyno button.
That's just it, though. You can jump to the Cyno and then immediately dock up, so the bounce doesn't matter, right? But on top of that, yes, he was saying you can mouse over the Cyno, and if you're in the tactical overlay, it will show a red ring, like you're seeing on screen right now. And that is the range in which a Capital can jump into. So their center of mass will be somewhere on or inside of that ring. So just make sure that you've got 10 kilometers from the edge of that ring to the model, and you typically won't bounce for a Capital.
Thank you very much. Sorry if that was a bit much. Thank you.
It's fine. Any other questions? Okay, sorry, I popped a snack while I was waiting. It's dry. Okay, so now that that's handled. So I touched on fuel. Okay, that is the primary consumable for jump drives. In every Capital, you will see a fuel bay, in addition to a ship maintenance bay, a fleet hangar, and your main cargo. So when you are jumping, depending on what faction your ship is based off of, you will have to have isotopes of one of 4 different types. For anything based off of an Amarian platform, that's going to be helium. Caldari will be nitrogen, Minimatar hydrogen, and Galente is oxygen. Since we do actually, for once, have a lot of faction things involved with Zernitras now, let's go into the faction ones real quick. So Zernitras require helium, as do, if for some reason you're able to get a hold of them, any Blood Raiders caps. The Marshal, if you're talking about Blops, also uses helium. And its new derivative that I can't remember the name of, the AT ship.
Python.
Yes, Python, thank you. The Rorqual is going to use oxygen, same as Galente. Angels use hydrogen, same as Minmatar. Garistas use nitrogen, same as Kaldari. And I believe the only other faction... No, I'm sorry. Sancha, if you somehow wind up with a Revenant, that's helium as well. And then Serpentis, I believe, is the only other faction that has capitals. And that is going to be oxygen as well. If I missed anything, sorry. Odds are maybe one of you will ever own a faction capital. They're ludicrously expensive and hard to get a hold of in the first place, for the most part. Although CCP has been making it significantly easier recently. There is a second type of fuel that you will wind up needing, since we're talking about fuel bay, and that is strontium clathrates. You will need those for dreads, faxes, and titans. And then supercarriers use heavy water for one specific module. On top of that, for your ship to be able to use fuel that you are carrying, there are precisely two places it can pull it from to be able to jump. One is your fuel bay, which is where I highly recommend you put all your fuel. The other location is your main cargo. If you notice, I have plenty of backup topes there for the Titan. There's also backup topes, and there we go, in this container in the fleet hangar. So that if you put it in the fleet hangar, that is an actual backup. It cannot be infringed upon. The ship will not pull from it. On top of that, unfortunately, strontium you can put into a ship, put into your ship maintenance bay, you can carry extra. But with isotopes, you cannot. That is blocked out. It has to be in the fleet hangar, the fuel bay, or the main cargo for you to carry it. I believe... Oh, on top of that, there are a couple things that can prevent you from jumping as well. One is your capacitor being too low. That's the other cost to jumping that I had not discussed yet. Your capacitor needs to be at 75% or higher. That is what jump drive operation primarily affects. I alluded to it earlier, but, you know, everyone should have it if they have jump fuel conservation and jump drive calibration, because it's a prerequisite. So, 75% capacitor, you can jump. The other things that can prevent you from jumping are the same things that can prevent you from warping off. So that's going to be your points, your scrams, your bubbles. Any of those will prevent you from jumping. The exception to that being supers and titans. I have not been ballsy enough to find out, to verify, but from my understanding, supers and titans can jump out if they are just, pointed or scrammed once or twice. They have a bonus to their warp core stability, right? So they can just warp off if you don't have a hick or a bubble or a whole lot of points and scrams. Any questions? Okay, perfect. Let's start going into what each type of capital does. So, the bread and butter of what our Cap fleet has been doing recently is the Dreadnought. So, what I just hopped into is a Revelation Navy issue. This is, a standard bomb dread, basically, which is our term for an anti-capital buffer dreadnought. There are a few strengths and weaknesses to dreads. For one, they can get rather tanky for a capital, and they do a hell of a lot of damage for a capital. Note, I'm saying capital, not super. Supers and Titans, which I'm going to just refer to as super caps, as in super capitals, can both just easily do more damage than a dreadnought. So, out of standard capitals, your anti-capital buffer dreadnought is going to have the highest damage. It will typically have the highest or close to the highest tank. And it will have the worst application, right? Big guns, bad tracking. Same as with battleships. When you put a beam or a railgun, it's not going to work as well as, taking a cruiser out with a pulse or a blaster, right? As you get bigger, they start having a harder time applying. Now, we're going to undock to show you the next thing, just so that way you can see the UI. So, with dreadnoughts, the primary thing that enables them to be effective is this button right here. It's called the Siege module. What it is going to do is it is going to completely disable your propulsion. You can't move, you can't align, you can't do anything. If you were moving when you hit the button, you are stuck moving in that direction until you coast to a stop. On top of that, it is going to block all remote reps, all logi. You can't get any. You can't get cav transfer. You are entirely on your own. And that's part of why dreads can get away with being so tanky, is because they can't catch any reps, right? If you shoot them long enough, they will die, no matter what. The effects of this module, in terms of positive benefits, you also get massive bonuses to your fire rate, your damage output, and your ability to repair yourself. This is going to be the same with any type of siege module in the game. So, I just noticed my overlay is up on Discord. I'm going to disable that real quick. Okay, there we go. As I was saying, so your siege modules, there are several different types based on what hull you're putting it on. But universally throughout the game, they are going to boost your damage, they are going to boost your ability to heal yourself, and they are going to boost your rate of fire. With capital shield siege modules, the siege module and the triage module, which is the version of it for a force auxiliary, which we'll get to later, it is going to be a 5-minute timer. Once you click that button, you are stuck in space on your own without any help surviving for 5 minutes. This module, when you activate it, requires strontium clathrates. I already mentioned those when we were talking about fuel bays, right? So they're rather large, but the flip side of this is that you can just, shove a hauler full of it in your maintenance bay, right? So I'm going to bring up one thing that's slightly out of order, but that's more because we haven't touched on it yet. So I'm going to run through the order of priorities for when you put a dreadnought into combat. But to be able to do that, I need to highlight one thing. As I said earlier, there is a capacitor cost to jumping. So you are going to need to immediately start running your cap booster as soon as you land to get yourself back up to, at a minimum, 75% capacitor, but optimally you want to stay as close to 100% as possible, just so that way if you screw up, you've got some buffer, right? So, if you are in a dreadnought and you are going into a combat scenario, your order of priorities, you're going to undock, you're going to jump. The option isn't here because Cyno's in the same system and it's also not lit. You are going to stop your ship if you bump. Okay? One way to do it, if it's just a little bit of motion, is to just control space like normal, or click the stop the ship button on your capacitor menu. The other way is what we refer to as a handbrake. And if you notice, I double clicked in space so that way I can build up some speed so I can demonstrate this. When you're having to do a handbrake, what you're going to do, because of the way that the physics works in EVE, it is faster to accelerate than to stop, universally. So what you're going to do is you are going to be in your tactical overview, and you're going to kind of line it up so that way the vector that you're traveling on is in between your ship and the camera. And then you're just going to double click in space roughly behind you. There we go. As soon as you see that circle, you're starting to handbrake. If you notice, my speed is bleeding off pretty fast. And then as soon as it gets close to zero, as soon as it starts to flip over, you control space. And that's going to get you to a effective stop much faster than anything else will. Once you have that under control, you are going to activate all of your support mods. That's going to be your tank. That's going to be your tracking computers or missile guidance computers if you're in a Phoenix. As I said, you're going to start chewing through your cap boosters. I'm not going to hit the button because I'm at full cap because I just undocked. Once you are stationary or close to it, 10 meters per second or less, if you were told siege green, you are going to activate your siege module. I'm a bad example. This shouldn't be in your F1 slot. It should be on your bottom slot, so that way it's harder to hit on accident. But you would click this button, and you would wind up with a green ring, just like every other active module. If you are told siege red, that means that you are deactivating it to prepare to extract. You click on it again, it will turn red. As soon as it finishes its current cycle, it will terminate. Once you have activated that siege module, you are in a combat status. You are following primaries. Everyone follow so far? Any questions? Okay, looks like that is a no. Wonderful. One other phrase to look out for when you're inserting into combat, by the way, is to control your bumps. You technically come in with no velocity. What makes you move is when you and another capital ship occupy the same space and you bump off of each other. So control your bumps is the same as stop your ships, is the same as handbrake, right? It's just if someone's saying stop your ships, that's typically going to be a control space. If I'm screaming at you to handbrake, that means everyone's bumping, everyone needs to stop immediately, do the extra couple of steps. One other thing to keep in mind, there are actually other types of configurations that a dreadnought can have. So that was covering the common fleet scenario for a capital fleet. There are also what's called high-angle weapons for a dreadnought. Those are going to be lower ranged, much lower damage versions of the guns that track much, much, much better. This Phoenix Navy issue that I have is Beehive Fit, and is a good example of that. So I'm going to undock and show you. It's also a good example of the other way that you can tank your ship with a dreadnought, which is having an active tank. So, as I said, your high-angle guns are going to apply much better. The Phoenix is actually the easiest one to grasp that with, because if you're using the anti-capital guns, you are using, depending on whether you are running the Brave fit or the Goonswarm fit or whoever's fit, it might be different. You're going to be running either XL torpedoes or XL cruise missiles. If you are running a high-angle weapon, you're just running rapid torpedo launchers. Just like how all the other missile platforms work, if you see rapid, it is, hey, look, you're firing one size down, but much, much faster. And so anything that a torpedo battleship can apply to, that a stealth bomber can apply to, the Phoenix will be able to apply to. With the other dreads, since they use guns, it gets a little bit more complicated, but in general, they will be able to shoot anything cruiser up, and they will be able to shoot anything battle cruiser up decently. Your high-angle dreads are typically going to reach out somewhere between 60 and 120 kilometers max range. And if you notice, as I mentioned and alluded to, you can actually active tank a dreadnought. And it does get significant bonuses to that from the siege module. So, if you look right here, without being in siege, this Capital Shield Booster gives me 975 hit points per second. It's not a lot, a battleship can do that easily. As soon as you go into siege, which I am emulating by using simulation, I don't want to, siege on the Keepstar in staging, it's going to go up drastically. If you notice, 3,900 hit points per second, and apparently I'm a bad and never made sure that this thing had a Tech 2 siege module, so it could be even higher. This is what you get for buying capitals off of people, guys. T2 siege module actually apparently doesn't affect it. I thought it did. What it does affect, though, is damage output. So, if you notice, if I load Tech 2 damage torpedoes, 3,717 DPS. And they do actually have battleship level application. Any questions on high-angle weapons or active tank on Dreads? Wonderful. Apparently I'm covering everything exceptionally well. Next I'm going to cover faxes or force auxiliaries. These used to just be a role that carriers played, but CCP decided to change it up and make it so that way they were their own whole class. So these are capital-sized logi. And also, they are typically used for links, right? So that they are the support ship for a capital fleet. In general, take everything I said for dreadnoughts, but instead of shooting things, you're going to be repping them, right? You're going to go in, you're going to get your ship under control, you're going to get your cap boosted up a little bit, and then if triage green is called, not siege green, triage green, you will hit your funny button, and you will start following broadcasts to repair things as if you were in a Basilisk, Scimitar, Oneiros Guardian, whatever. The main pain point for getting into one of these, by the way, is that you have to have all of the capital skills, and then you also have to train Logistics 5 as a prerequisite to getting the triage module. There is one adjustment to the first steps when you go in, though. That's going to be, you are immediately going to put your links up. All of our fax fits, if I remember correctly, have either 1 or 2 links modules on them, and you're going to make sure those are running as much as possible. You also have a capital remote capacitor transmitter on your ship if you're flying a fax. That is not for cap chaining. Faxes are under the same restrictions as dreads regarding remote assistance. If you have hit the funny button, you can't get reps, you can't get cap. That is for sending capacitor to other ships. So, for example, if there are carriers on grid, they can receive reps at all times. They could get muted out and have their hardeners shut off. Send them some capacitor, all's well that ends well, right? The dreads just came out of out of siege, and they need to extract someone's low on capacitor. Cap transfer. Other than that, oh, and there's one other restriction to the triage module that you don't have to worry about with the siege module. Faxes have a drone bay. When you are in triage, unless I'm remembering incorrectly, you cannot use damage drones. You can only use logistics drones. The other thing to keep in mind, they actually have a massive bonus to the transfer amount of the logistics drones. So even without being in triage, a full set of heavy bots will actually do almost the same as a Basilisk or a Guardian in terms of reps. Next thing to cover is going to be our carriers. Apparently I forgot to re-online my armor plates after the last fleet. So carriers are absolutely the grid control platform. And they're also still to this day, when you have enough of them, the single best platform for engaging subcaps with dreads. Sorry, with capitals, not dreads. You aren't going to see it very often because you can engage subcaps easier with less ships if you're in dreads. But if you have, 50, 60 carriers and enough faxes to keep them alive, absolutely throw them in there, start shredding things. If you want a good example of how effective carriers and supers can be against subcaps, look up KTAC-IY in Great Wildlands on Zkill and scroll back until you suddenly don't get a new day for about 5 pages, 6 pages. It was great fun. Mostly that was Supercarriers, but the same principles apply. The way that carriers do damage is unlike dreads. Dreads have guns, they have weapons fitted. Carriers are overgrown drone boats. The difference is they don't use drones, they use fighters. So these are basically, let's go with drones for grown-ups. They have a lot more control authority and precision that you can use them with compared to drones, right? So I am going to have to undock and put this Archon at some risk to show you this. But to hell with it. Goons are right here if something happens, right? So, under the first time you ever get into a carrier, where is... there we go. This is what you will see in your HUD, right? You'll just see, modules, capacitor menu, like any other ship. However, with carriers, there's actually a secondary layer to the UI, and that is accessed by clicking this button right here. If you hover over it, if you notice, it says click to toggle between modules and fighters. And then from here, if you want to be able to see both at once, which typically you will, you can click on this button right here and drag it somewhere on your screen, release it, and all of a sudden you have both layers visible. So that gives you full access to your ship modules. It gives you full access to your fighters. The next thing you're going to need to do to start using them is obviously to launch them, same as drones. You can either use this Launch All Fighters button, or you can right-click on a squad and choose Launch Squadron to Space. Once you have done that, if you notice, there's a little blue ring around my ship. I actually have their models and icons and everything turned off in most menus. There we go. Now we can actually see my fighter squadron. It's purple because it's in my fleet. It's got a little 1 tag that tells me which squadron it is on the overview. You notice a little 1, 2, 3. Now, if I select it, you'll notice that there is now a blue ring around it. That blue ring determines what your F1 through 8 will actually apply to. You can also apply it to your ship. So you can just use your keyboard shortcuts for the entire thing. You just have to switch back and forth what they're controlling. That also goes so far as aligning to something. So I can tell my carrier to approach the Cyno beacon right here. Go back to looking at my ship. And then I can choose this fighter. And unlike with drones, I can actually tell it to approach something, and it will do so. If you notice, it is now burning off towards the Ansiblex while my carrier continues to align up towards the Cyno beacon. You can also select multiple things just by or by One thing you do have to keep in mind regarding carriers, though, is that you do have to make sure that you have the correct thing selected when you are sending keyboard commands. There have been many times where, someone would accidentally, hit F3 and be running their smart bomb instead of having used their secondary attack with their fighter. I would also like to highlight, when you lock a target and start shooting it, you don't actually have to be within the engagement range of the fighters. If they are too far away, when you click the attack shortcut, they will start moving themselves towards the target. The downside is they won't automatically start shooting it. You have to click the button again once they are in range. The other thing to keep in mind, when you recall fighters, which is, you can use the general Shift R, just like with drones. If you notice, it says refueling for a few seconds. That is going to rearm that secondary attack, because it is a consumable attack. You only get so many uses every time you launch it. The other thing to keep in mind, if you lose fighters, unlike with drones, you can only lose one fighter at a time out of each flight. But the flip side is, if you recall them, then you have to take time loading them back into the tubes, because it only loads one at a time, as you see right now. If for some reason you come back, okay, apparently I cannot do that out here. I will just dock up to show you this. Moving things in and out of the fighter bay actually counts as refitting, by the way. That's why I was getting those pop-ups and it wasn't working, even though I'm just trying to split a stack. So here we go. Now that I'm docked up and I can freely refit. So if, for example, you lost a fighter, right? Obviously, right now I'm loading 8 so that I can simulate this. The nice thing is that you don't have to unload it to reload it. You can just drag another fighter on top of it. It will load the fighter into the remaining slot. The last thing that I haven't mentioned is that there are three types of fighters, right? These Templars that I have loaded right now are what are referred to as damage or lights. That is going to be your standard carrier damage fighter. This is going to be the most damage you can output at any given time, but it's going to not apply well to small things. The next type is what's called SS, or Space Superiority. That is your equits, grams, stuff like that. These are primarily used for killing other fighters. There are a few other small niche use cases, but CCP has nerfed them recently, so they aren't getting used for those nearly as much. The last type, which I don't actually have any on hand to throw in because I apparently lost half my fighter bay, is going to be support fighters. There are fighters that you can throw out that will apply webs, or will tackle, or will newt, or jam the ship that you are targeting with them. You can only have one of those loaded at a time, though. Does anyone have any questions about carriers and their mechanics now?
Could you qualify what you meant by you can only have one loaded at a time? You mean like one type?
You can only have one squad of support fighters loaded.
Okay, so the squad has to all be the same type then?
Yes, no, absolutely. So, like, for example, here, let me reload real quick.
Yeah, so you load the tube, and the tube only takes the same stuff at one time ever.
Yeah, so I can't stack Einherjes on top of the Templars. I have to unload the Templars to be able to use the Einherjes. It's one type per squad slot, period. However,
yeah, that makes sense.
You can absolutely mix and match what types of fighters are in each tube. You don't have to have all three be the same. In fact, 90% of the time, if you see a ping for carriers, you will either see in the ping or in MOTD as soon as you load into the fleet a specific mix of what fighters you are expected to run. It will typically say something along the lines of, say, all carriers load 2 damage, 1 SS, 3 SS, rest damage in bay. What that means is you are going to have 2 squads of light fighters, damage fighters, in your fighter tubes ready to go. 1 squad of SS fighters loaded in your tubes ready to go. And then you will be expected to have 3 more squads of space superiority fighters in your fighter bay ready to go, and fill the rest with damage. The same with support fighters. Those are typically called out by the exact type because each faction does a different E-War with their support fighters, right? And if you don't have that particular type and there's none on market, just throw whatever in there, right? Like, if, for example, you're told to load 2 damage and 1 squad of sirens, and you can't find any sirens, just throw a 3rd squad of damage in, right? That's going to be the best opportunity. If for some reason you're told to have 1 of each, I don't think I would ever be insane enough to try that. It's basically just better to unload 1 tube and reload it with something else. But in that case, pick your poison. Does anyone else have any questions?
I had a quick question.
Okay, go for it, Bella.
Yeah, so it was mostly just about like going back to kind of like faxes, and they're actually underneath the carrier tab, right? They're actually like just like a different, they train under the same skill, but
yes, they are
a support
absolutely
role.
still classified as carriers. They are just not a carrier, right? They split the logistics role off of carriers to their own independent class, because it used to be that carriers could do that was absolutely the wrong button. It used to be that carriers could do basically everything. They could damage, they could rep, they could support. Like, it was ludicrous. And they also applied basically perfectly to anything except for destroyers and frigates. And if you wanted to apply perfectly to those, you just loaded space superiority fighters.
And it also looks like a bigger difference too is that the carriers can actually use like fighters, and I'm trying to look at it in game here. It looks like the Mikola, for example, it looks like it doesn't have the ability to have like just use like regular drones.
Correct. So faxes what happened with faxes when they split carriers into two things. The faxes lost their ability to launch fighters, regained their ability to launch drones. Because back in the day, it used to be carriers just launched 10 drones, right? It was literally the exact same as drone mechanics, just a lot of them. And then they inherited the ability to fit the triage module and the reps, while the carriers lost that. So it used to be that carriers could do all of the above, at least at some point in their history, and then they split it.
Perfect, thank you. And then one other thing from earlier, you mentioned briefly about the maintenance bays. I just was kind of curious as like the mechanics of like if you're able to utilize the maintenance bay like when you're undocked, like are you able to like move anything out of it? And
absolutely, the answer is you can. Give me just a second. This is the only one I know of that actually has something in the maintenance bay, so I will show you with my Wyvern. So I hadn't really gotten into it other than, saying you can shove ships into it. So the ship maintenance bay is a pretty interesting feature. Capitals, I said the wrong C word, have a ship maintenance bay of 1 million cubic meters. That's enough for, 2 battleships, 5, maybe 6 battle cruisers, or a nice mix in between, right? Super caps have 5 million because they're bigger, they're more expensive. It makes sense for them to be able to carry more, right? So this next part actually applies to your fleet hangars as well. If you're looking at the stream, you'll notice that there are 2 little buttons next to each of them, okay? One is enable access to fleet members, one is enable access to corp members. I'm going to turn on the corp member access for the ship maintenance bay. If you notice, I've got a Nestor, a Mars shuttle, and a Council diplomatic shuttle in the maintenance bay here, okay? So, for one, I can just outright eject a ship, right? I can just click launch ship from bay, and boom, right there, a Mars shuttle. I can also, as long as there isn't someone in it, scoop it to maintenance bay. Bada bing, bada boom, it's now in the maintenance bay, right? So that gives some interesting gameplay features in and of itself. But the main strength of it is that I can come down here with my Cyno. It doesn't have to be a Cyno ship, it can be any ship. It's going to take a second for it to burn down. And then once I'm within range, which is 2,500 meters, same as for taking a Titan bridge or a gate or whatever. Basically everything in the game, if you need to interact with it, be within 2,500 meters. You can actually right-click, and there are now additional options. You have Store Vessel, Open Ship Maintenance Bay, and Open Fleet Hangar. Okay? So I can, if you notice, Fleet Hangar didn't open because I didn't tell it over here that I wanted it open. Nothing's selected. So only I can access it. But the maintenance bay, I opened up to everyone in fleet. So I can open the ship maintenance bay, and if you notice, I've got ships available. I also have the option to store my vessel. So that will eject me from my Rapier. I'm now in a pod, and the Rapier shows up in the maintenance bay. On top of that, you can board ship from bay, or you can even launch a ship from bay from outside of the ship. If you notice, the Mars shuttle is out of the ship again. So I can now scoop that back in. And then I'm going to board this Council diplomatic shuttle. Bada bing, bada boom. I'm no longer in a pod. I'm in that shuttle.
And wow, so it's a lot like almost like a structure, like you can it's like docking and undocking and like while you're in space.
Exactly. Except you aren't having to wait through the docking animation, right? So if you have a Capital with its maintenance bay open, you can just swap ships around. In fact, let me reboard the Cyno to show the other benefit of the maintenance bay. Oh, huh. Apparently my Cyno got shot up and I didn't realize it at some point. But anyways, so the other thing that having the maintenance bay there allows you to do, any ship that is in your fleet with a maintenance bay, it doesn't even need to be open, is able to refit in space. So I can go and literally just say, oh, I don't want this shield extender on my ship anymore. And it's gone. It's in cargo now. I'm not docked up. I can also say, oh, I do want this on. And now it's fitted back to my ship. I can strip literally everything except for rigs off of it if I have enough cargo space and just put them back on. And if you notice, why the fuck am I taking... Oh. Never mind. I just figured out why I was taking damage. By the way, don't pull your extenders or plates off and be surprised when you take damage. Technically, when you refit in space, you don't get that HP. Like, your HP max goes down, and then when it increases again, it doesn't go back up. That's why you were seeing my hit points bounce back and forth.
One last question about that. Are there any restrictions, like if you're locked or anything like that? Does it become inaccessible or anything like that?
Yes. So you cannot refit in space or swap ships while you have an active combat timer. Keep in mind, that is not the 15-minute one. That is the 1-minute one that also blocks you from docking or taking a gate.
Thank you very much. I kind of knew about it, and I was looking at some information for it, and thank you.
Not a problem. I'd also like to highlight one thing. This is not going to be relevant for anyone who is in a regular cap, because it is not cost effective for a standard cap to do this. But if you look at the attributes on the Nestor, it does actually have a ship maintenance bay. Right? So you actually have the ability to refit in space next to a Nestor. So Supers and Titans are expected to have one in their maintenance bay, because what that allows you to do is you can simply launch the ship from your bay and then start refitting in space. No issues. And then scoop it back to your maintenance bay.
Like an instant mobile depot.
Exactly. Admittedly, it's much easier to shoot than a mobile depot, but it is instant. Also, I don't know if anyone noticed, there are actually some pretty cool animations when you use the maintenance bay. A Wyvern does not look like this normally. All those holographic effects are exclusively when you are launching or scooping ships from maintenance bay. Just a cool little tidbit. Okay, so any questions on what we've covered so far? Carriers, dreads, faxes, jump drives, anything?
I guess restrictions on being able to use ansiplexes or gates if you had to. I know it's like absolutely not something you want to do.
Very, very, very good question. And that actually makes me remember that I forgot one other thing as well. So, no capital ship can go into high sec, period. There are a very few exceptions for people who built their capitals in high sec back before CCP realized that was a problem. But they also aren't allowed to ever put a gun on them, right? So, like, for example, Kriba, if you've heard of them, he has a notorious revelation called the Veldnot. Instead of having guns, he has 3 mining lasers on it. And he will literally, undock it in a Mar, warp out to the ore field, and just go mining with a revelation. But, capitals, specifically capitals, can take ansiplexes. Super capitals, supercarriers, titans, cannot. However, all of them can take gates. The one thing to keep in mind, though, gating your capital round is heavily, heavily, heavily advised against. If you are willing to just do the jumps, use your jump drive to move from point A to point B, as long as you are lighting the Cyno somewhere that you are able to dock, it is nigh impossible to catch you as long as you dock quickly. Does that make sense? Why we advise people not to start gating? Cool, I will assume that's a yes. Now, to just give a quick informational about supers and titans, I don't want to go into too much detail. So, supercarriers are the absolute DPS kings of the entire game. Basically, full stop. There are some things that can do more damage than them, but it requires doing funny things and abnormal fits, right? So, supercarriers have 2 additional types of fighters that they can use relative to carriers, at the expense of not being able to launch support fighters. They have heavy fighters, and in that there are 2 types. There is anti-cap fighters, and there is long-range fighters. So anti-cap and LR are what they're typically referred to as. The long-range fighters, like these Amitats, if you notice, they have a rather long optimal range. They don't have to get close to ships to be able to shoot them. And that, combined with not very good, but still better than the anti-cap fighters tracking and application, means that you can actually engage small ships with them like you can with light fighters, but they do significantly more damage. Something on the order of 2 to 3 times, if I remember correctly. Anti-cap fighters, they're very short range. The anti-caps will also be referred to as SR, by the way. But they're very close range. They can't hit the broadside of a barn, but they absolutely shit out DPS, for lack of a better way to phrase it. So I'm going to actually load my anti-cap fighters, just so that way you can see what I'm talking about here. It's going to take a minute. And if you notice, my 5th squadron is Templars, right? You only get 4 squads of heavy fighters nowadays in a super. Your 5th slot has to be a light fighter. And you can only have up to 3 light fighters. So you can have the same light fighter capacity as a carrier, but no more. Anyways, if you notice, if I simulate, I'm doing over 20,000 DPS while having, I actually pulled a hardener off while I had the Nestor out, haven't docked back up to fix it, and I still have 50 million EHP, right? Supercarriers are huge, chunky bricks that do more DPS than almost anything in the game. The flip side of that coin is the Titan. So Titans are primarily going to be a support platform, right? That's their primary use. I'm sure you've seen it. You join a fleet and you're told, get on the Titan, take the bridge, right? Everyone's seen that. That is their primary role. However, when everything is hitting the fan, when you have no other option, there is another role that Titans come in and play. And that is to be literally just the absolute king of alpha damage. Titans have what is referred to as a doomsday. It is a button that you push, you do a lot of damage, either all at once or over a very short period of time in an AoE effect. Which one you're using determines the AoE effect, by the way. The one that I pulled off of my ship, the Bosonic Field Generator, that one is a short-range cone. The Lance is a very long beam. And then the Doomsday itself is single target, capital only. And if you notice what this does, you click the button, you wait for its spool up time, and then you do literally millions of damage in one shot. So, I am actually still training the new skill that they put out to increase the damage further. I only have Advanced Doomsday Operation 3. And I'm doing 4.4 million hit points of damage with the Doomsday if I fire it. Titans also typically are going to have long-range weapons as opposed to short-range. So that's going to be your beams, railguns, artillery, or cruise missiles. Because you don't want to put them in right up against the fight in almost any situation, because they're so expensive and so hard to replace. Like, just putting in the job to build the Titan after everything else has been built, all the components, all the everything, literally takes a month. Anyways, does anyone have any questions?
Yeah, I have one more question. I'm sorry.
No, don't apologize. Go for it. We're basically at the end of what I wanted to cover, and it's been the hour and a half, so I'm probably going to wrap this up as soon as everyone's asked their questions.
All right, perfect. It was just a little bit about carriers and fighters, grid distances. So I know that like the fighters, like if you say had to warp away or something like that, the fighters will actually like warp to you, right? One thing I didn't know is, for example, say if you were like 160 km away from a target and you told your fighters to engage that target, will they just slow burn, or will they actually get to do their little warp to or is that only when they're getting recalled?
Thank you for asking that. I actually completely forgot to cover it. So I'm gonna give a little bit more detail about fighter navigation since I forgot to earlier. Yes, confirm undocking. Sorry. I normally use this carrier to provide links in cap fleets. My main doesn't have T2 link skills. Anyways, so if we are talking about fighters, you are correct. They will warp back to you. The magic number is somewhere around 250 kilometers. There have been times where it's past 250 and, you know, I've seen people recall them and they just slow burn back. I've also seen times where it's exactly 250 and they just warp back, right? It seems it's all up to the ccp.math executable on their server. And we all know how unreliable that can be.
In the first case, do you just have like those fighters that are slow boating, just turn them around and maybe try to get them to a warpable distance?
Yeah, that's actually half the time what's happened when they didn't want to warp back.
Okay.
But in any case,
So about the fighters, I'm sorry. Can they warp around the system?
Yes. So they cannot warp to a target. They have to slow burn there. But you can absolutely bring them back to your ship from literally the other side of the system. Give me just a second, I'll even demonstrate. So if you notice, there's a Fortizar on the other side of the system on the YPW gate from where I am right now, right? I am starting to align there. As soon as I am close to aligned, I will launch a squad of fighters and warp over there, and I will be able to recall them from the other side of the system. If you notice, I launched a squad of fighters. It's showing as being in space with an unknown distance. You do not want to try to recall while you are in warp. If you do, they will initiate a warp to where you are, not where you are going. And once they have done that warp once, unless you are on grid with them, to give them another command, they will not warp back.
Oh, that's fucked. Are they not even scannable?
They are scannable, but what you have to do is you have to go scoop them with like a DST, right? You can't reconnect to fighters. And if they warp to you and you aren't there, they'll just disconnect. But I just hit Shift R, right? So they show as returning now.
Yes. So make sure you come out of the warp tunnel before you recall.
In a few seconds, they should pop out of warp behind me. There we go. They'll typically come in at, 10 to 30 kilometers, so they will have to burn in a bit. So, once they land, hit that MWD, they'll burn in faster. Fighters can also be pointed, right? If they get pointed, they can't return if you warp off. And so, unfortunately, in that situation, what you're forced to do, let me launch a squad so that way I can show you this. If you have squads in space, if you notice, I don't have a combat timer, I don't have anything, but I lost tether, right? Having fighters out means you don't get any protection from the structure you're on. Which means that if your fighters get tackled while you're in warp and you can't get them to recall, what you have to do to get the carrier safe, because the carrier is much more expensive than the fighters, is you have to abandon the squadron, which is in the right click menu on that squad.
You just quickly clarify on that. Like, you're saying if you warped off and they were pointed, and then you go to land and they're still in space and haven't warped back to you, when you go to like you are here, you're saying you won't be able to tether, or can you just not even dock?
Okay, allow me to. I don't think I've ever actually tested docking with fighters out. I can't remember.
Would you maintain an aggro timer if your fighters were, I guess, they're tackled? That's not aggro.
Yeah, no, you. So, if they continue to shoot things, you will keep getting that cycle, right?
Yeah, but fighters are manual.
If you warp off with the fighters aggro to something, they'll actually keep shooting it, right? They aren't like drones.
It should maintain an aggro timer, which you can't dock with.
Yeah, it would. So, long story short, you don't really want to.
Can you assist fleet members?
No, you cannot. When you're flying a carrier, congratulations, you are flying 3 little frigates that you are controlling at the same time as the mothership, is basically how it works out.
I just thought I can assist my Ishtar.
Yep, nope, unfortunately that is not the case anymore. It used to be back when carriers launched drones. You could absolutely assist them. So this was also back before there were any limitations on how many drones could be assisted to one person. So you could literally, take a gate and there's a single tackle frigate and an entire swarm of sentry drones on the gate. And, you get tackled and all the sentries just instantly lock you up and blow you up, right? 0 chance of survival. And it's not that way anymore because, honestly, that was a little bit broken, right? Especially given how cheap capitals were back then. They used to only require minerals to build, but now they're treated a lot more like T2 ships.
So I have a different question. There is the Entosis link. Do we still use them? Because they also use strontium.
So, in general, in almost every single situation, the last thing you want to do with the capital is put an Entosis link on it. If you are putting an Entosis link on it, you want to make damn sure that it is Tech 2.
I still get PTSD whenever somebody mentions toasting minnows.
Yeah. So they have... What's the penalty? I can't remember the exact quantity. It's
5 times?
It's either 5... Yeah, so it's a 5 times penalty to Entosis link duration, right? So what that means is if you're using a T1 Entosis link, it's normally 10 minutes per cycle, right? So instead of 10 minutes to link to the node, you are stuck there for 50 before you even start making progress. If you're using T2, I believe it's a 2-minute cycle. So you're only stuck there for 10 minutes. But at the same time, that's 2 full siege or triage cycles, right? Like, if someone really wants to make sure that you cannot make it off that grid, cannot complete that cycle, it doesn't matter what you're in, unless you're in a carrier with, 20 faxes repping you. you will not survive that long enough to actually get started on the node.
They can still jam you, right?
Actually, no. That is one of the benefits to the Siege and the Triage modules, is that it makes you nigh invulnerable to any form of E-War. So give me just a second to pull up a Siege modules show. So if you notice, when the Siege module is active, you get a 70% resistance to sensor damps, 80% resistance to remote sensor boosters, remote tracking computers, 70% resistance to weapon disruption, and a 100% resistance to being jammed. That is why toasting capitals are a thing, is because it makes it literally impossible for you to just be jammed off. And on top of that, when you have a siege or a triage module active, it increases your mass and makes it very, very, very hard to move your ship. So it's also very hard to get you out of range of being linked. Any more questions?
I've got a couple of questions / comments, if you don't mind.
Go for it.
So I'm actually an older pilot, and I used to fly Capitals, back in the era that you mentioned before carriers were split off into two groups. And I still have, but they are a long ways away from our current space. Is there any assistance that's offered, like moving those, or should I just sell them in place and rebuy closer out here?
When you say very far off, what region?
Let me check. Just give me 2 seconds.
To be fair, you can also just say, it's up in the northwest, it's in the northeast, it's like, you don't have to be specific.
They are in Blackrise right now.
Okay. If you want to sell them, you can absolutely do so. Because getting them down here from Blackrise is going to effectively be a week-long ordeal because of jump fatigue, right? You can only do 3 jumps, and then you've got 5 hours of blue timer, and it takes 30 minutes in between each jump. And it's like a 8 or 9 jump route or something like that. So you basically have to stage it out over multiple days. However, if you do really want to bring them home, you can actually go to the ping tool, which is events.bravecollective.com, and there's an option there called Lost Sheep. I don't know if it's visible to everyone or only to people who are actually in the CAP group, but it is there, and if you send a ping with that, it will come to me and the other FCs who are trusted to run capitals. That basically being, Kel, Profi, Shattered. There are other FCs who are trusted, but they're expected to only use a couple at a time, not entire fleets, if that makes sense. So they also don't handle a lot of the back end work. I digress. What that will do is it will send a ping to us in a Slack channel saying that you need help, and then we will reach out and figure out what you need, get you a route, stuff like that, right? So if you have a Cyno alt and you're comfortable moving it yourself, but you don't know where to go, we send you a .land route. If you actually need help, we can, go out there, bring pilots, bring Cynos, whatever. It'll probably wind up being me, because I wind up getting asked to do most of them. One thing to keep in mind,
is there...
real quick, before I forget again, one thing to keep in mind when you are selling capitals, Imperium has a rule about not arming our enemies, right? So you are welcome to sell your caps if they are far from Imperium space publicly. If they are even within like 1 to 2 regions, reach out to me, or I believe Yondu is the one who handles compliance for that, and he's also one of the people who does broker stuff for Super S Smart. But like, reach out, find who you need to ask them if it's safe for you to sell it or not. If you're trying to, sell it at an NPC station or something.
Okay, that sounds good. And I guess my last question, when you were talking about the Force Auxiliary, you were saying that you always want to make sure you get your links up first. I'm not familiar. What are you talking about when you say links?
Okay, so here, let's simulate it real quick. Sorry, my right click decided to not work for some reason. So.
Oh, you're just talking about command bursts. Okay,
yes,
never mind.
links
I
is
just
another
unfamiliar
name
with
for command
terminology,
bursts.
but I understand. Okay.
Yep. I think it comes from, I think they used to be called command links way back in the day when they applied like system-wide or something like that. Anyways, any other questions?
Okay, that's all the questions I had. Thank you.
Not a problem. Any other questions about the caps themselves before I get into our final topic?
I guess I had
fighter.
one. Go ahead, man.
Go ahead. So when you are unloading fighters, I noticed that they take space. So is there a general guideline on not cramming your fighter bay too full?
Okay, so every squad of fighters is actually going to take basically the same amount of space, no matter whether it's space superiority or light or support. Even though they have different numbers of fighters in a squad based on the type, the way that it maths out, it takes up the same volume for a squad, right? So what I typically recommend to people, and I'm going to use my Wyvern for this, is that so if you notice, in my Wyvern, I have enough space to unload 1 tube, but not 2. See? It throws an error, says, oh, more units would be required to do this. So what I tell people is to load their fighter bays with a tube empty. So load all your tubes except for 1, and then you can go and fill it completely to the brim, absolutely max it out, and then you have enough space once you load that last tube to be able to swap your fighters out, your squads out as needed. It just limits you to 1 tube at once, but you get the absolute maximum number of fighters while still being able to do that. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Perfect. And Volo, I believe you had a question as well?
Yeah, really quick. I just was curious if, like, when you do try to, warp Capital, do they benefit from like the microdrive like warp trick, like, or just a prop mod trick or anything like that? Is that something that also works with them too, or is that something that's not really used?
They absolutely do. So the carriers have an MWD on them. I'm sure some people noticed that I actually used it to get into warp to that Fortizar to demonstrate the fighters.
Yeah, I did. So I was wondering.
Yeah. So they do absolutely benefit from that. In general, any capital, any super capital will be able to do it with one cycle of a 50,000 meganewton MWD.
Aren't they
Anything
like 20
smaller,
seconds long instead of 10?
yes, it's 20 seconds instead of 10, but that's still faster than the 30 to 60 seconds it typically takes to warp a cap or a super cap. Like, for example, right here, I have a shield super, right? 32-second align time. If I hop in my Phoenix Navy, right, that's smaller, still shield. This is basically your best aligning option. It's still over 30 seconds. If I hop into the Avatar, this should be, 52 seconds. If you don't use a prop acceleration in something big, it can literally take you an entire minute to get into warp. Especially if someone bumps you once.
I've seen a lot of nanofits that have 500 meganewtons. What about the size cutoff for that to be useful? I mean, I've even seen Titans with those, I think.
500 meganewtons?
Yeah.
That's faction, right?
You absolutely can, but there are some tricks and some requirements to be able to do it that are well past the scope of this class.
Okay.
But like, if you need to know, because you have one, DM me. I can walk you through it. I literally use a 500 MN on my avatar. Not this one. This one's technically one that a fellow RCI director and I share and just dump in the hangar when we're done with it. Mine is a bit of a meme.
That's fair. I can bother Xenon about it too.
Zunum doesn't know it as well as I do, to say the least, especially given the fact that he learned about it from me. Any other questions? Okay. Last thing I wanted... I'm sorry, Toto. I saw you miking up, but no sound came through. I guess that was accidental. So, last thing I wanted to cover before we... Toto, you started trying to talk again.
He wrote in chat his mic doesn't work.
Okay, so it's just a bug. Got it. So, the last thing I wanted to cover was how to...
He asked a question. Do T2 dreads have any use?
Oh, the T2 dreads. I can't fly them. I keep forgetting that they exist. Yes, they do. So, Lancer Dreadnoughts, their primary use is to go in and prevent supers, or like basically just go and prevent an entire fleet from being able to drop. Right? So, sorry, from being able to dock or jump, not drop. So the version of the lance that they have is shorter ranged, does a lot less damage than a Titan lance. And its primary effect is that it makes it so that way you can't dock, jump, warp, or cloak for, I believe it's 30 seconds. Other than that, they're effectively much, much, much more expensive dreadnoughts. You can active fit them, you can buffer fit them, you can anti-cap fit them, you can high angle fit them, right? Like, there's a huge list of options, but it's the exact same list of options that you would have with any other dread. Any other questions?
I guess I have one last one about Cyno.
Okay.
We have two. Cyno fits the Falcon and the, what is the other one?
The Rapier.
The Rapier. I'm not sure what to scale my alts first, so
So
I guess the Rapier is
technically-
just for webbing.
No. So it's more which faction do you already have Cruiser 5 for, right? Because all of the Force Recons, all of the Recon cruisers that get a bonus to fitting a cloaking device are able to light a Cyno. So that's going to be the Falcon, the Rapier, the Pilgrim, and the Arazu. Right? It's just that we never actually put Pilgrim or Arazu fits on the wiki because we kind of would rather most people not use those for their Cyno ults if they're just moving caps around, right? Because they have a lot less tank. Cruiser armor just isn't very tanky, honestly. Whereas, the Rapier at least gets like 55, 60,000 EHP, and the Falcon will actually get over 100 in the right conditions.
So I guess those are just for fleet Cynos, right? Not for private use.
No, absolutely.
All
Use them for
Cynos
private
are-
use as well. A Cyno is a Cyno is a Cyno, right? So you don't have to get a different ship.
Okay, so
On top of that,
it's mainly for tank. I guess.
I didn't mention this before, but if you are in a cap fleet and the FC did not explicitly ask you to light a Cyno, do not light a Cyno. I should have mentioned that earlier, but there we go. If you're in a fleet, actually, just if you're in a fleet in general, don't light a Cyno unless you're asked to by the FC.
Standing fleet accepted.
Yes, exempting standing fleet, or like for example, like if you're running your own fleet, or if you're in Beehive and you're getting tackled, right? Those are situations like, yes, absolutely, if you need to light a Cyno in fleet. But if it's like a PvP fleet, or you're out group crabbing, and there's actually an FC coordinating it, general rule of thumb, do not light unless asked to. Any other questions on the ships themselves or any of the mechanics?
Yeah, just one thing I've been dying to ask about the Alliance, Cyno, like for the Falcon one. I noticed that even though with my Magic 14, all the skills trained and everything, always 16, over for negative on CPU. So I'm just wondering if you guys expect us to also just use like a cheap like CPU implant with that fit in order to make it
No,
like workable.
that is not expected. So the fit does actually work if you meet very specific criteria. Allow me to demonstrate 1 second. So here we go. If you notice, I'm simulating the Falcon fit with my main. I have 4 CPU to spare. The thing is, you get a 20% reduction in the CPU requirement of your cloak per level of recon ships. The thing is, though, we aren't expecting everyone to train Recon 5 like I did. So the solution is that you're you're almost always going to want to keep your standard Cyno online. You choose whether you need the covert Cyno or your probe launcher online, and offline the one you don't need. Notice how much CPU that freed up. It's not quite as much with the covert Cyno, but it's still 50 CPU, right?
That's exactly what it was. I only have it at 4. I didn't realize. Thank you. That because I was like, what is it? What is it? Okay, that is what. Thank you.
Yep, it is Recon Ships 5 is the reason that you can't. And there is absolutely zero expectation for you to train it. Just selectively offline what you don't need. If you realize that you do need it, as long as you are at or above 95% capacitor, you can online it in space. It just eats a huge chunk of your cap to do it. You can also offline in space.
Thank you very
so
much.
You can offline one module, online the other. Offlining is free. Any other questions?
I'm sorry, I have another one.
Go for it.
Is there SRP for lost capitals?
Yes and no. So I'm sure you noticed that the Alliance started doing universal SRP within our space, up to a certain amount each month. For one, a single capital will blow straight past that limit. For two, no. Just know they are not covered under that, unless I'm greatly mistaken. But at the same time, it wouldn't get the full value anyways, and it would lock you out of it for the rest of the month. The flip side of that, if it's in fleet use, yes. If there is a fleet sent to the Caps Pings channel, you will be able to get SRP for it, unless it is explicitly stated otherwise. 90% of the time that it is explicitly stated otherwise, it will go into the YOLO Caps group, which I actually don't even know how to get into anymore. It's changed half a dozen times because people tried to take it over and do their own thing with it, and I just couldn't be bothered to keep up with it. I just was already in it, and I was still, experienced person that they could talk to. But I never bothered keeping up with exactly how to get in, if that makes sense. However, that does tie in to the final point I wanted to cover, which I'm going to go ahead and do now, and then stop the recording, and we can answer any further questions at that point, because this has run on for a while now, which is how to get into the Cap group for Brave. So if you go to the Brave wiki, that was weird. Everyone should be able to see this now. So if you go to the Brave wiki, this is the home page. Go to the Brave military section on the left. I'm sorry. Was I coming through there? I think I accidentally clicked on something and locked myself out of speaking.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Let me try.
Now you are.
Okay. Well, as I was saying, if you go to the Brave military tab, right here, front and center on the bottom half of the page is Brave Capital Group. It's literally the default option for this section. If you scroll down, it has instructions right here. So what you're going to do, you're going to make sure that all your characters are added to core, which you should already have. It's a basic requirement for being in Brave. there is a new system called security clearances. I'm not going to get super into it, but long story short, it makes it easier on the back end for everybody, and it also makes it faster for you to get into another SIG that's considered equivalent risk, right? And then once you have put that in, you can put and gotten approved, you can put in a capital group application. There are direct links to both on the page. The requirements to join the Brave Cap group are to be in Slack and Mumble, to have been in Brave for a minimum of a month. If you joined Brave with your corporation, in general, what's going to be counted is your time in that corporation, not your time in Brave. You have to meet the skill requirements, which I will get into momentarily, and you have to own or be able to afford a capital ship. That means you either need to have several billion-esque liquid to be able to buy one, or you need to have one in your assets already. In terms of the skill plans, this is going to be a 2-stage plan, okay? So we have what's called the Fresh Capital Alt skill plan. That is skills that every capital pilot is expected to have, regardless of what they fly. That's going to be things like your jump fuel conservation 4, your jump drive calibration 5, your fitting skills, capital ships 5, just to be able to sit in the cap. Or I think it's technically only, I don't remember what it is, right? But this comes out to a little over 6 months of training if you don't already have those skills. Once you have that trained, then there are special skill plans for whatever ship you choose to fly. If you are flying a Navy issue Dreadnought, you're just going to use the standard version of the skill plan. Any questions so far? Okay, awesome. To go one step further, if you are trying to acquire a Super or a Titan, I'm not going to go into how to acquire one because it can be a bit of a pain and there are 17 different variations. But if you already own one and you're trying to get into the group, you have to be in the CAF group. You have to do the application links, just like with the CAF group. And then you have to meet the corresponding standard capitals skill plan. So for supers, that's going to be the carrier skill plan. For Titans, that is going to be the dread skill plan. As the person who processes them, I will tell you right now, if a skill doesn't make sense for the ship, I'm not going to worry about it. So like, for example, if you're training a dedicated Titan alt, and you don't bother training tactical weapon reconfiguration for the siege module and the actual Dreadnought skill, I'm not going to hold that against you. It's more about the support skills and the gun skills. However, with the carriers, you need everything except for support fighters on the skill plan. On top of that, if you're getting into a Hell specifically, there are actually 2 skill plans for the Nidhogger. One is just named the same as all the others, Nidhogger from Capital Alt. The other one is Nidhogger Legacy from Capital Alt. We used to have Shield Nidhoggers, but they became much less viable, so we switched them over to Armor. We kept the old skill plan because of the fact that it's the prerequisite for flying a Hell. Any questions? Okay. Awesome. Last thing I want to cover. The best way to acquire a capital within Brave. In general, you will not find them on market because there are restrictions to putting capitals on market from us being part of Imperium. What you're going to want to do instead is you're going to open up Slack and you are going to go to either Marketplace or Services. If you go to Marketplace, you're going to find people who already have a cap who are trying to sell it. If you go to Services, there are a number of groups or people who will be willing to build you a capital for typically cheaper than you'll find them on Marketplace. The flip side is you'll have to wait 2 to 3 weeks to get it. Examples for that would be, like for example, RCI Made is my corpse build program. Hiromura Sokyo also will, at least at times, build Amar capitals. Kerno is a huge cap producer who's in BNI. He normally pre-builds though, so you'll see his stuff in Marketplace. And there's at least 2 or 3 others, but I can't remember them off the top of my head, unfortunately. I'm not trying to, be biased and push you towards specific people. I just can't remember the names off the top of my head. And with that, we're going to call it quits for the actual recording, and we will have a further Q&A session afterwards, in case anyone has further questions, since we're running out of time. Thank you very much for showing up, everyone. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.